Why do some UFC champions were never built to last? While some champions feel like they are built for an era, others feel like they are built for a moment, and that difference matters. Winning a UFC belt is one thing, although it is really special and only the top 1% of those who get in the UFC achieve it, keeping it is something completely different. A fighter can be dangerous enough to beat the champion, skilled enough to have one perfect night, and disciplined enough to climb all the way to the top. But that does not always mean their reign is built to survive. And that's what we are going to dive in and discover in this video. Now let's get in for the juicy part. To begin with, I think we can all agree that the warning signs are usually there. Sometimes the style is too risky, sometimes the defense has too many openings, sometimes the division is too deep, sometimes the physical tools are too important. The path to the belt can be real, but still fragile. And when those fighters finally become champion, it can feel like the beginning of a new era. But in hindsight, it was never really an era. It was a peak, a moment where everything lined up at the perfect time. Cody Garbrandt is one of the clearest examples. When Cody beat Dominic Cruz, it looked like a superstar had arrived. He was fast, sharp, confident, and explosive. For one night, everything about him worked perfectly. His footwork was loose, his counters were clean, his reactions were incredible, and against one of the smartest champions in UFC history, Cody looked calm in a way almost nobody expected. This made him get called by many the best fighter for 25 minutes. His problem was balance, and that version of Cody required a very delicate balance. His greatness depended on speed, confidence, timing, and emotional control. When all of those things were working together, he looked special. But when even one of them slipped, the whole system became much more fragile. In his next fights against TJ Dillashaw, the next bantamweight champion, you could see Cody severely emotionally attached to the fight, which did not help him out at all. That is what people sometimes forget about fighters built on reactions. They can look unbeatable while they are ahead of the moment, but once the fight becomes emotional or once they are forced into exchanges they cannot fully control, the same gifts that make them dangerous can pull them into danger. Cody's chin wasn't also the best, which further accentuated his decline. The title exposed the risk. After Cody became champion, that weakness became clearer. Against TJ Dillashaw, the speed was still there. The power was still there. The danger was still there. But the control was not the same. Cody's style always carried risk because he was willing to exchange in moments where a more patient champion might reset. And at the highest level, that risk eventually gets punished over and over again. I'm not saying that Cody was a fluke champion. Beating Dominic Cruz the way he did was one of the best title winning performances ever. But becoming champion exposed the difference between having a brilliant night and having a reign that can survive every kind of problem. Some fighters are built to catch lightning, fewer are built to keep it. Moving on to another fighter, Luke Rockhold was another champion who looked devastating at his best, but fragile underneath. At his peak, Rockhold was a nightmare. His kicking game was long and sharp. His grappling was elite, and once he got on top, he could make great fighters look completely stuck. His win over Chris Weidman showed exactly how dangerous he was. He did not just win the title, he broke the fight open in a way that made him look like the next long-reigning middleweight champion. But Rockhold had a weakness that's sitting in plain sight. His offensive game was world-class, but his defensive boxing was never as safe as it needed to be. He could control range beautifully when things were going his way. He could punish fighters at kicking distance, he could dominate on the ground, but when opponents got inside and forced him into boxing exchanges, the structure became less reliable, and that is a dangerous flaw for a champion. Once you hold the belt, the division studies you differently. People stop asking how good you are and start asking where you can be hurt and exploited. Fortunately for Michael Bisping, he found that answer pretty early in their title fight. He did not need to be more talented everywhere. He did not need to dominate every phase. He just needed to reach the part of the fight where Rockhold was most vulnerable. His chin. Rockhold was absolutely champion level, but his reign was never as stable as it looked because the path to beating him was always there. It just needed the right timing and one clean moment. Moving on to more recent fighters, Jiri Prochaska is a different kind of example. His problem is not that he lacks skill. It is almost the opposite. Jiri is so creative, so dangerous, and so willing to fight through chaos that he can overwhelm fighters in ways they are not prepared for. He brings an energy that feels impossible to fully train for. Angles come from strange places. Rhythm changes constantly. He does not fight like a normal champion, and that is part of why he became one. But chaos cuts both ways. The same chaos that makes Jiri special also makes a long reign difficult. His style creates openings for him, but it also creates openings for his opponents. He is willing to absorb danger to create offense. He is willing to move through bad positions to find big moments. And for a contender, that can be a weapon. But for a champion, it can become a problem. In his last fight versus Ulberg, I feel like a part of why he lost was due to him abandoning his reckless style and becoming too stationary due to Ulberg's knee injury. Jamahal Hill fits this topic in another way. When he became champion, it was clear he belonged at the top level. He was composed, powerful, and dangerous from southpaw. His win over Glover Teixeira showed real patience and real skill and a real beatdown. He did not fight like someone overwhelmed by the moment and defeated a experienced opponent. He looked ready to take on the division. But being ready to win the title is not always the same as being built to dominate the division. Light heavyweight is a strange division. It can look open, then suddenly become brutal. One matchup can make a champion look untouchable, the next can expose a very specific weakness. For Hill, the questions were always about how his game would hold up across different types of challengers and if he could remain injury free, which he did not. The burden of being champion is proving the whole system. Hill's striking was dangerous enough to win the belt, but a long reign would have required proving the rest of the system again and again. Elite grapplers, elite kickers, long strikers, experienced veterans who could force him into layered problems. You do not just have to prove your best weapon works, you have to prove your weaker areas can survive, and later on Hill's footwork proved to be one of his biggest flaws, probably further declined due to his torn Achilles. Sometimes a fighter becomes champion before every question has been answered. That does not make the achievement less real. It just makes the reign more fragile. Not every short reigning champion was lucky. Not every champion who loses quickly was overrated. Sometimes they were exactly as good as they looked, just not built for the long version of greatness. I personally thought he stood a big chance against Pereira in UFC 300. To resume all of this information, a fragile champion can look incredible when everything lines up. A lasting champion has to find ways to win when nothing lines up. That is why some title wins feel like the start of something massive, but later look more like the highest point of a career arc. The fighter reached the summit, they deserved to be there. But the climb was better suited to them than the defense of the summit. Defending a title also changes the sport around you. Before becoming champion, you are hunting. After becoming champion, you are being hunted. Every contender watches you differently. Every coach studies your habits. Every weakness becomes a project and a point to talk about. So every moment of hesitation becomes something to exploit. The pattern becomes clear. Cody Garbrandt had one of the most brilliant championship performances ever, but his style depended on a balance that was hard to maintain. Luke Rockhold had championship-level weapons, but a defensive flaw that became too dangerous to hide. Jiri Prochaska had chaos, creativity, and finishing ability, but chaos is hard to defend over multiple reigns. Jamahal Hill had real power and composure, but lacked fundamentals and was injury-prone. All of them were good enough to become champion. That part is not in question. But being good enough to win the belt does not mean a fighter is built to keep it, and maybe that is what makes the UFC so unforgiving. There are no safe champions for long. The moment you reach the top, the sport starts working against you. That is the harsh truth. Some champions are built for long reigns, some are built for one perfect run, and some, no matter how brilliant they looked on the night they won the belt, were never really built to last. If you enjoy this type of content and want to see more of this, consider subscribing and liking the video. It will be highly appreciated. Peace.